Welcome to resilience+Rise, the podcast where we transform adversities into triumph and illuminate the extraordinary potential within all of us. I'm your host, Thomas Carrier, the resilience coach, ultra marathoner, and a firm believer in your next powerful chapter. This podcast is a companion to my upcoming book, Resilience+Rise 26.2 Transformative Miles to Unleash Your Marathon of Life Mindset, coming spring 2025. Today's guest, when I had looked into his background, and of course I've known him through LinkedIn, a title which came up was From the Depths of Despair to the Pinnacle of Purpose. Imagine a life forged in the fires of adversities, where addiction and trauma becomes a crucible for extraordinary transformation. Today, I have the honor of welcoming onto Resilience+Rise Joshua T. Berglan, a man who not only stared into the abyss, but emerged as a beacon of hope for the marginalized and the forgotten. Joshua is also known as the world's mayor, isn't just a best-selling author or an award-winning producer. He's a storyteller who wields his craft like his lifeline. He empowers others to reclaim who they are, pulling others from the shadows. Rather than me going, I could talk on and on. He's a man of a lot of character and capabilities. Joshua, welcome to Resilience+Rise.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you very, very much.
In fact, just going through that introduction itself, I feel so proud just to be associated with you. So, one of the words which I used was a storyteller. Tell me a story
There's
about
not a
who you are, where you are, and currently where you are at this point of time.
It's such a long story. There's really, I'll give the condensed version because I also don't want to harp on trauma at all. Um, I have had a unique advantage in my life that most people who go through lots of trauma don't have. And I've experienced every form of it. I believe that there is, and some of the things that I could say out loud, and
Actually,
it's
Joshua,
still.
please do, because there would be people who would be faced with those challenges or traumas. And as I mentioned, this is unfiltered, unscripted. So please feel, because there could be people who are still hiding in the shadows, and hearing you would give them a hope.
Well, let me just address it this way then, because I don't, again, there's a lot of heavy triggering stories to tell.
Okay, sorry.
And yeah, it's okay. And it's not my triggers I'm worried about, it's other people because it's a very violent past. But you can talk about, I was sexually abused, physically abused, abandoned. I went through all those things. Um, my sisters disappeared when I was 7, or in my childlike brain, they disappeared, but come to find out it was something my father did to them. My sexual abuse that went on for years from men and women, so I created sexual identity issues, um, was untreated mental illness, which later took almost 30 something years to realize that it was multiple personality disorder. No wonder my life was so confusing. But I grew up in a home where my father was very successful. My mom was Mrs. America. Um, I grew up around success. I knew what it looked like, and that was the advantage that I was talking about earlier. Like, I don't know what most people's lives are like. I just know what mine is like. But it seems like when I hear the stories of people that were sexually and physically abused and, went through these various traumas, and there's some other things, again, I just don't even want to talk about right now. But that said, um, the image of the person is like they were dirt poor, and they were subjects of incest, or there was homelessness at youth and all that stuff. I didn't. see that. That's not what I experienced. I grew up at the country club. I grew up being dropped off at the country club. Of course, I grew up with that typical, that front facing Aussie inherit, Leave It to Beaver family. That's what it looked like. My mom, again, gorgeous, still beautiful. My dad was a stud. It was excellent business, was a successful musician. So we had all the things and we were around all the people, but that didn't mean that trauma didn't hit at home. It didn't mean that bad things didn't happen and bad things didn't happen to me. And because a lot did. But the biggest thing that I think I want to focus on of all the horrific things that I experienced, again, you want to get into the occult and you want to get into witchcraft. I mean, I can talk about some very dark things that I don't want to go down because I think the ultimate crime for me, or the worst sin that I adapted, was learning to lie. Now, of course, when I learned to lie, it wasn't just simple white lies. It was keeping the family secrets about what was happening behind closed doors. And, I got to tell you, as a kid, it's very, uh, it's very troubling to be like, you need to be honest, you need to tell the truth. But then when it comes time to keeping secrets of the family, it's like, well, you need to keep your mouth shut. And of course, we think about, as families, we talk about Santa Claus. We tell our kids about Santa Claus, and we look at that as a simple white lie. But the fact is, you're still lying, and that's a very, very small example for a very big picture. Because let me just say that even these little, like, being told to be honest, but then told to lie and keep secrets by the same people. Now imagine I'm being molested. Now all of a sudden I have two men that anally penetrated me and forced me into oral sex as a 7-year-old, after they're done with me, saying to me, you keep your mouth shut. We're going to do these things to you if you say anything. Like things like that. It's very confusing. Then you learn to keep secrets. And then going to church, because I already have sexual identity issues as a kid, I'm going to church and I'm hearing that I'm going to hell nonstop. Like everything you do is you're going to hell growing up in the Baptist church. But, I'm hearing these things. And it's very, very confusing. So, I mean, it's like almost no wonder I ended up with DID. So, but the learning to lie was the biggest danger because that became everything, lying to protect my family, lying to protect my abusers, lying to protect myself from getting in trouble, nonstop lies. And so it's no wonder here it is. I'm trying to be a good person. I'm going to church. I'm doing all those things that I'm supposed to do. But I have this warfare going on inside me because I don't know what's real and I don't know what's true because all the people that I'm supposed to believe, and they're the ones telling me to be honest, are also telling me the ones to lie. And I'm not blaming anyone. That's because that's one small thing. But those little lies that I learned to tell as a young kid are the very lies that kept me from turning my life around. Because had I known what I figured out 10 years ago, that if I just tell the truth, it may hurt what happens next, but there's nothing to weigh me down. There's no more poison in my system. Like telling the truth is the most powerful supernatural gift that we can give, that we have. We all have supernatural power and very few of us use it, and it's the truth. And so I would say that I can talk about going from being abused to becoming an abuser, from being violently taken advantage of to becoming a very violent person. Sports allowed me to hide my violence. It celebrated my violence. I mean, I got football scholarships because I was a violent person. I don't even know how athletic I really was, but I was meaner than snot. And I really wanted to hurt people, and that helped me in sports. It didn't help me in golf though. I was a good golfer. That violence didn't work on the golf course so well, but I didn't turn it off on the golf course, for the record. I was a very messed up kid. But ultimately, when I became, when I would say that you fast forward to my life and struggling mentally, struggling with insecurities, lying, trying to fit in, doing anything to fit in, wanting to feel normal, never felt normal. And then I discovered drugs. The very first time I did cocaine, I became a sex addict. A chem sex addict would be the appropriate word. And the reason I say that is because the very first time I did cocaine, all of the horrific nightmares I started with, all of the nightmares I was having, they turned to fantasies. And anyone who knows cocaine, and like, cocaine and sex and what goes with that, well, let's just say that I had a hard time stopping because it was the only time that I ever felt normal, as weird as that is. Like chemsex was an escape from the hell inside of my body, unlike anything else on the planet. It's no wonder that's one of the most difficult addictions to get over because it's not just, like fighting drug addiction's one thing, but then sex and fighting a sex addiction is even more challenging. The reason why is because we're humans and we want to have sex. But then imagine every time that I mean, you have a beautiful partner that you enjoy, but then every time you get turned on, you just want a line of cocaine or you want to smoke some meth because you want to. Mentally, it's like, oh, well, it's way better this way. And so for 20 years, I battled that, but that came with a lot of even more lies and compounding lies, and then what happens when somebody tries to protect their lies? They become violent and they'll do anything. I mean, look what's happening politically. People, well, I don't want to go down that road. Never mind. I'm not, I'm not going there. That said, the secrets that I had became something that I held on to because I'm still the secrets. The secrets, like anytime the secrets got so big that anytime I saw a way out, I would self sabotage because I was so worried about others finding out about all these other bad things that I've done. And to self preserve, it would be more lies or self sabotage or sabotaging other people. And, and I also had this knack of getting away with stuff. Like every time I went to jail, I would get out the next day. And then, mentally, I'm like, oh, I could change. And I'd try. And the minute somebody would say to me, you're always going to be a piece of shit, you're always going to be a druggie, you're always going to be a piece of shit faggot, whatever the names I'd be called. I mean, I was called a lot of names, and rightfully so, because I was a pretty awful person. And I would just go, yeah, you're right. And then I would go back into my addiction. And this went on for 20 years. It took being arrested the sixth time, facing 5 years in prison. Um, for some reason, I don't know why, when I was getting booked, it was in LA County. I have no idea why I told them I had HIV. I did, but I didn't know why I told them. I think I thought in my narcissistic brain, I thought that it was going to give me special privileges. Instead, they put me in in the psych ward, like I was in isolation. And the cell, well, the room I'm in now is way bigger. I mean, it was tiny. I couldn't see anything around me, but I could hear the people next to me, and they're all screaming madmen. It was just screaming madmen nonstop. But when I first got in, I was still high on cocaine, and I had a bottle of tequila and an 8 ball in me. So I'm fine, high, and still out of my mind. It took about 24 hours for me to realize where I actually was and what was really going on, that I was facing 5 years. And it's interesting. That was the very first time in my life that I was somewhere that I couldn't run and I couldn't escape, because I'd always escape. I have this really amazing ability. You were complimenting me, talking about perseverance and overcoming. Even when I was a troublemaker, I was good at overcoming because I would just move. I would just keep on going. I moved so fast that it was never, nothing could ever stick to me until I created such a web, there was nowhere to run. And that web landed me in isolation, looking at 5 years. I I'm going to just share this. I'm going to share the short version of the story. It's in my book. It's the last chapter of my book, Death. The Devil Inside Me, Death is the last chapter. But, I was, there was nothing to distract me from the madman. It was going crazy. I have sensory issues as it is. I didn't have the tremors back then. That's a new thing. But I, um, I was begging for something to read. I was asking for a magazine, a book. They wouldn't give me anything. And for some reason, I remembered this show that used to be on HBO called Oz, a prison show. And I said, they have to give me a Bible. Like, I think I saw that in that show, and I remembered it randomly. This is from 10 years ago. And I said, can I have a Bible? And they were like, yeah, we'll be right back. We'll be right back in jail means hours. But they showed up with the Bible. And I didn't, I grew up in church, but I had no really respect for religion or God, myself, or anything else. So I started reading the book. I open up Genesis first and I'm reading it and I'm like laughing at it, making a mockery of it, going, what is this? There's like two creation stories in here. Like what's this isn't real. What is going on? Then I go to Revelation, started reading Revelations. Revelations is not what you read in jail. Just saying. It was very uncomfortable. Then I went to Proverbs. And Proverbs is really easy to read. And any of the 8 million versions of the Bible, the Proverbs is pretty standard as an easy one to read. So I'm reading Proverbs. I'm like, God, I'm doing that wrong and that wrong and that wrong. So then I remember going to John. I remembered my friend John, who I'd been arrested with before. That's a funny story. I wish I had time to go into. And so I started reading John, started hearing about Jesus in a way that I hadn't really heard before. And it kind of just, it started to like open my heart a little bit. But then as my heart opened, I got pissed off. And I just started thinking about all the times that I tried to turn my life around, all the times I tried to change. And I got fucking pissed. Pardon my French. I started screaming at God. Why won't you fix me? Why won't you change me like you change everybody else? Like, I've tried. Fix me. Why would you fix me? And then I heard, you have to forgive your father. How the fuck am I supposed to do that? Again, pardon my French, but that's what I said. I learned God can handle cursing, by the way. What? How am I supposed to do that after what he did to me? After what he did to my mom? What he did to my sisters? It happened to him too. There's something about that, hearing it happened to him too, that gave me a compassion for my father that I'd never had. I hated my dad. I showed up an hour late to his funeral because I was at a sex party till 6 a.m. doing tons of coke and drinking, and I didn't stop till 6 a.m. The funeral started at 8. I showed up at 9:30. Made a complete mockery of his funeral. Still just completely strung out of my mind. Had no business being there. I hated him that bad. But then, as compassion set in, I started to think to myself, I've become just like my dad. Oh wait, no, I'm way worse than my dad. Way worse. And as the compassion set in, I started to realize that it wasn't necessarily that I needed to forgive my dad. I needed to ask forgiveness from my dead dad. And
So,
so weird telling the story because I don't hate him now. Like I love my dad now. He's dead, and I love him. And I'm every and so much of what I'm doing now is like
sorry.
no, don't be sorry. It's like a continuation of what he stopped doing. And oh crap. Uh, the the it's a continuation of what he stopped. He gave up on his dream. He gave up on his dream to make his dad happy. Anyway, so as I'm telling him that as I'm asking for forgiveness, I begin to ask God to forgive me. And because I know that I've ran from my purpose, I've ran from what He's called me to do, I ran from everything that I knew I was supposed to do. And I just said, my life is no longer my own. Take my life, it's yours. And I have to tell you that the most supernatural experience of my life happened after that. I got hit by lightning on top of my head. It knocked me on my butt. And then I was like lifted up dramatically. It was the craziest thing. Like, I can't explain it. Did lightning really hit my head? No. But, but that's what it felt like. And I swear the energy that was going through my body when this happened, it was like I was lifted up and floating. And I just started singing, like making up words. And then as this is going on, I start to get these visions. And it was all of my childhood visions to remind me that that was God with me the entire time. And then my next marching orders of what I was supposed to do next. I ended up getting out of jail 5 days later with no charges. And I was on the streets of downtown LA. And I was like, well, God, this was a lot easier to make promises about than when I was behind bars, about being all in. My life is no longer my own, it's yours. I surrender. Well, I didn't know where I was supposed to start, but as I was walking the streets of downtown LA, I knew I was different, and I knew my life was going to be different, and I had a renewed purpose of what I was supposed to do. And ever since that day, I've pursued it relentlessly. And this has been 10 years now.
Fantastic. Amazing. So, what's your purpose now? Hey, all. So, at this point of time, I have stopped the recording. This is the end of part one. The next part would be next week. Stay tuned as we journey across Joshua's life to what happened next after he lost his voice. So, from Resilience plus Rise, I conclude today's session. Take care and have a good week. Thank you.